my practice is largely text-based, whether that's in through typography and print or through site-specific work or public artworks and various collaborations. This is an idea that I've wanted to sort of get established for a while now. So living in Tasmania, I wanted to make a piece of work which was a response to a place that's important to me in a community and sort of society that's important to me, and I wanted to reflect that in a truthful, in an honest way. And I decided to do that through this idea of a printed public artwork, which would be hung on the idea of several themes. So pretty much for all of this first issue came from a residency I did on King Island through Arts Tasmania. And that residency I did with another artist, James Newitt, and we'd previously worked together on a 3-year project in Hobart called the Right Here Project, where we used every single advertising billboard to present personal narratives of a wide range of people in and around Hobart. And then they started talking to us about moments of loss and losing children, and that's when I decided to look at that idea on the island of older residents and offset that against the industry of the island, which is largely King Island beef and the abattoir is one of the big employers. So I went through a tour of the abattoir because I really wanted to see what it was like when big animals die, and so I went through the chill rooms and the kill floor, and that for me sort of crystallised this moment of death, offsetting that against the story of particularly these 3 women. So there's like an interview with a woman who gets the whole community to collect these feral cats and freeze them in town, and then she makes hats out of the skins. So it's that sort of idea against the everyday killing of the cattle, and I guess where their skins go, or where absolutely every tiny little part of this animal is used in some way. So I printed 1,000 copies of this magazine, and I knew that I wanted to shoot it with a bullet hole, so I sort of designed it with that in mind. And I had imagined that all 1,000 would be shot, but it took a really long time. And I had imagined we'd just sort of stack them up and aim and shoot, which is what we did. But then there was a beautiful bullet hole in the first one, and then when you came to the back, there was just like a hole like this as the bullet had ripped through. And I wrote. So I'm sort of interested also in blurring that truth and fiction. And is it still truthful if I'm fictionalising an event or if it's a first-person narrative? So I'm sort of quite surprised at the final result. But to me, it's an artwork in an edition of 1,000 pieces, as if it was a print on a wall. Or, I'm interested as an artist in responding to individuals who want to contribute to the work. But I'm not as interested in allowing people in the community to make a work that represents their voice. It's about my response to them as an individual rather than giving them the tools to respond themselves, I guess, with this project.
Okay, so this is a work called In Loco Parentis, which is a 2-channel work, and it features myself and my father basically performing, actually going through the process of teaching. I attempt to sort of mimic his movements and actions and the way that he teaches. And that's got significance for me personally for a few different reasons. One of them is that I work as a school teacher as well as making art, and I'm obviously influenced by the way that he taught, because his act of teaching has been sort of pretty fundamental in my approach to the way I teach. In loco parentis is a Latin term, and it means in place of the parent, which is sort of the definition of what teachers were, the role that they were meant to play when schools first became accessible to people. It's significant for me because not only was he my teacher, but he also my father. So my father was my teacher, and that he sort of directs his energy towards what would be a classroom. And as an audience, you sit where a student would sit. So, and the background is a blackboard, which is also quite interesting. Because blackboards are going away now, they're not going to be around for very much longer, and blackboards are quite a significant symbol of teaching. And I was interested in framing the image so that it explored the sort of, that's all you see. You see the blackboard as the entire world of the teacher. Baudrillard actually writes about it, and he writes about this idea of the way that the blackboard becomes an artefact once it's put in an art gallery or a museum. And I was interested in that because so much gets written on these blackboards and it's just dusted off at the end of a lesson. So there's so much knowledge and so much information put onto those spaces, and they're completely temporary. As an art teacher, you're spending a lot of time drawing and making images and communicating ideas on blackboards that are all sort of temporary, and I found that an interesting idea to sort of, I guess, document something that's really a temporary sort of process.
So last year I went back to uni and did my honours year, and the work behind us is a reworking of the work I did for honours, particularly looking at inequality between first world and third world or developing nations. So I was feeling very concerned about this, but not really knowing what action to do, and so this work isn't so much about kind of making action about this, but rather just kind of expressing and looking at these differences. So that was the starting point, and I wanted to talk about this in a way that was being talked about quite differently to what you see on the news, or what activist groups do, because that wasn't my intent. So I didn't want to do something that was really strong hitting or graphic in images of, you know, people suffering or living in poor conditions. So I started investigating fables, and I was really interested in the way they could be used and the fact that they could be used as allegories, but in themselves they're kind of just pointed stories. They're not specific to any context, so there's a fluidity about them and there's an ability to apply them to different situations. The wolf in the sheepskin. So you'll see there's a dog laying on a sheepskin, because I wanted to work with that fable but also change it. I like the story of the wolf in the sheepskin with that kind of deceptive facade that it talks about, pretending that you're someone that you're not. And it kind of resonated with me with a feeling that I have a lot of things that, in a sense, maybe I haven't fully worked for, that someone else, you know, in another country, they've made them, but it's also been at a cost to them, the cost of their lives. So the original fable actually has links to role-playing and pretending you're someone you're not in quite a specific context, one of the fables that I'd read. So it's been used quite differently in terms of the moral, but I was more interested in it as a story, and the modern interpretation that we're familiar with as it's something as Davis. So I kind of made this shift, and it's a shift that really kind of follows in my thinking of an inversion between the relationship of a predator dog, being the wolf, and a pet dog, which is Prey. So it's more a continuing of elements. So in both the way I presented it and the original fable, you have a dog, one situation predator, one situation prey, and you have the sheepskin first as a disguise and then just as a matter of comfort. So I saw the dog on the sheepskin kind of like the way that we have the things that we have all around us, and the fact that we're not always engaged with, you know, the dog's not always realising that that's a sheep that it's kind of laying on. So about storytelling, but I mean kind of what I'm looking at now, and I mean things kind of shift. I find I'll look at a theme for a while and then I'll drop it and start. So at the moment I'm kind of looking more into kind of narratives, in historic narratives, and questioning, you know, museums' roles in dialogue of objects and what's collected and what's not collected and how it's presented. So kind of interrogating that kind of power structure.